Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Susan Ray, and I'm the head of adult services here at the Simsbury Public Library. And I'd like to welcome you to our program today with Matt Giza from the Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. Matt will be telling us all about the services that the State Library offers for the blind and how we can apply for it and what they have to offer. So Matt, thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you, Susan. It's good to be here. Thank you for the invitation to share information about the Connecticut State Library for the Blind and the information and the resources that we have available to Connecticut residents. So what we're going to focus on today is a little bit of background information about the program and who we serve within the state, as well as the equipment and services that we can provide. We're a group where if you have questions as we go along, please feel to raise your hand and I'll take questions as we go along. Also wanted to point out on your seat chairs, there are information packets that have some information that includes our contact information, some resources and more additional information about some of the services, as well as applications if you'd like to apply for service. So to give you a little background, I'll be using the acronym LBPH today, and that stands for the Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. And we are a unit of the Connecticut State Library's Division of Library Development. We also happen to be a regional library that is part of the National Library Services for the Blind and Print Disabled national network of libraries. So within the state, we sort of report to the state librarian, but then we also have our sort of federal partner, the NLS, that's the National Library Service for the Blind, and they're actually the provider of the books that we have in our collection, as well as the equipment that we make available to our patrons. So nationwide, we are one of several network libraries. So if you have friends and family that might reside outside of Connecticut, know that they might qualify for services, know that they can contact the regional library within their state for information to begin using services. The slides that we have today, I'll be sharing all of the information on the slide and describing any photos. So if anybody has difficulty seeing the screen for any reason or is unable to see the screen, know that I'll be describing everything that's on screen. I want to mention the mission for LBPH, and that mission is to connect, or the Connecticut State Library, the Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped, is to make available in formats accessible to people who are blind, people with a visual impairment, people with a reading disability, or people with a physical disability, books and magazines that are representative of the range of print materials typically found in a public library. And we do this by lending Braille books, recorded books, which in the parlance of NLS, the recorded books are known as talking books, and the playback equipment that is supplied to us by the Library of Congress, which is, in this case, the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled, or NLS. We also guide our readers to sources of Braille and talking books that are not in our own collection. We can provide reference and readers advisory and referral services to our patrons and readers. And we work with other libraries, government, and private agencies that serve people with disabilities. And we also reach out directly to people who might qualify or eligible for our services. To outline the eligibility criteria, LBPH in Connecticut serves residents who meet any one of the following criteria. Individuals who are blind or have a visual impairment, individuals who have a perceptual or reading disability, or individuals that who have a physical disability that makes it hard to hold or manipulate or to focus or move the eyes as needed to read a print book. The language that I've just shared with you is actually the eligibility criteria that is established by NLS and is how it appears on the application if you read through and look at the eligibility requirements. So any person who might meet any one of these three criteria would be eligible for services. And we'll talk more as we go further along in the program about the application process and how that will work. But first, I'd like to give you an overview of the collection and the types of resources that we have in our collection. The first thing that I want to emphasize is that everything that we have in the collection is absolutely free to our patrons. There are no overdue fees, there are no late fees or damage or loss fees or anything like that. And there's no application fee or anything like that to establish service. So the entirety of the service is free. This is kind of one of the nice things about our job at the State Library. We like to say our job is to convince people to use our free resources. So this is one of those cases where we want to make the information out there, get it out there for people so that they understand what's available. Thinking about the formats of the books, there are two main formats. There's Braille, and there's also the audio, as I mentioned, which NLS calls talking books. And both for Braille and the talking book, there are books as well as magazines in the collection. For example, with the audio magazines, the total number of titles is now over 40 different magazine titles that are available in audio format or talking book format. And for Braille, it's now over 30 different titles available in Braille format. And this also includes the different equipment that might be needed to play the talking books and things like that as well. So all of the sort of playback equipment that is necessary is included as part of the service. In terms of how people can access the materials once they're signed up for the service, there's two main access points. One is delivery of physical items through the United States Postal Service. Excuse me. And the other option is to download. So we'll talk a little bit later about both of those delivery methods and what types of resources are coming through the U.S. mail and what kind of things can be downloaded. The other part of the collection, just kind of give you a sense of the other materials that are there. We will find nonfiction and fiction. The fiction collection spans the literary genres, so people who really enjoy their cozy mysteries will find cozy mysteries. And so we will find all sorts of literary genres represented in the collection. There is a special emphasis on bestsellers, so NLS makes sure that as titles are released from popular authors and destined to be bestsellers or on the bestseller list, those are added into the collection. I mentioned that magazines are available, and there's also a music section from NLS. And in the music section, what is available are music scores that are available in large print format or Braille. There are also music appreciation books and music instruction, so those how-to. So if you're learning an instrument or vocal techniques and that kind of thing, that's the type of resources that are also included in the music section. And for most requests and things like that, patrons actually go through LBPH here in Connecticut, but the music section is one of the aspects of the NLS service that patrons can directly reach out to that section with their requests or information needs. The audience, so the books that are included in the collection, I would generally categorize sort of ranging from targeted towards people who are elementary school age through adulthood. So it does span a number of different age ranges. And then the languages that are included in the collection, historically this was a collection that was predominantly an English language collection, followed by Spanish as the next language that was best represented in the collection. But that is beginning to change because of a treaty that was established in 2019 called the Marrakesh Treaty. And this is an international agreement between nations who have signed on to the treaty to share books in accessible formats. So NLS then now has, thanks to this Marrakesh Treaty, the ability to access and include a lot of books that have been written and published in world languages throughout the world. So the number of world languages that are represented in the collection is growing monthly. And if anyone ever had a question about, the number of titles that were available in a specific language, they're always welcome to call the Library for the Blind, and we can give you the updated picture of the number of titles available. Any questions on the collection so far, the overview that I've just provided? No? Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the current picture of how we sort of create book orders. I think this is one of the really great advantages of this particular service. Currently, we are using an NLS system called Duplication on Demand, and this allows us to create each patron request that comes in for talking books using this Duplication on Demand system. So the components of the system are as follows. When someone requests a title, one of our staff members, known as a reader's advisor, will take the request from a patron and then send that request to a computer that we have known as the Gutenberg computer. And the Gutenberg computer is what is displayed on your screen right now. The photo that we have is the photo of a desktop, and on that desktop are some blue plastic mailing containers that are on the shelf and on the right side of the computer display screen. At the center of the photograph is a display screen that has an application open, and that application has basically 20 boxes within it. Each box represents a talking book cartridge. Connected to this computer is what we call a toaster, and that is a rack that can take 20 talking book cartridges at one time. And so the boxes that are displayed on the screen are the orders that are sent by the reader's advisor. The Gutenberg machine automatically fills those orders and loads them onto the cartridge, or one of the cartridges that is displayed in this photograph in that toaster, in that rack of 20 cartridges. So the Gutenberg machine is just, as the orders come in, just constantly filling the orders and loading them onto the cartridge. We have the ability, thanks to the Duplication on Demand system, to load anywhere from 1 to 12 different titles on a single cartridge. So it used to be that our previous system before this was a lot like the collection in a public library, where we requested from an NLS single copies of a title that were on the shelf. And if we had bestsellers, we might be able to get 12 copies of that bestseller. And of course, if all 10 copies are checked out, then we have to start our holds list and waiting list, and people are waiting to receive items. What this system means now is that we actually have the access to the entire digital book collection available through NLS, which at this point is somewhere over 105,000 titles. So, and because we can custom create each patron's cartridge, we can determine and work with patrons. If they don't like having 6 books on a cartridge and only want to have 1, then that's fine. We can go and set up that particular patron's account so that they will only receive 1 title per cartridge. Patrons who are okay with multiple titles per cartridge then will load as many titles as they want onto a single cartridge. So we have patrons that are dealing with, in many cases, fewer items that they have to manage at home because we can have more than 1 title on a single cartridge. This system also allows for multiple simultaneous users of a single title. So we don't have any kind of embargo, or when one item is checked out, that means it's not available to anyone else. So we could have many patrons, 20 patrons requesting the same title, and all 20 of them can be using that same title at the same time. So this is the big advantage of our Duplication on Demand system. So when the cartridges the orders have been completed, we can just scan them, check them out, and then that is when the items are sent in the mail to the U.S., to the patrons via the U.S. Postal Service. So this brings me to talking a little bit more about what are some of the items that can go through the U.S. mail and what are some of the items that might be available through download. So I was just describing the talking book cartridge production, and so I'll talk a little bit more about talking book cartridges and the machines necessary to play them back, because that's one way to read is your talking books, is using the talking book cartridge and what's known as a digital talking book machine. So if you're viewing the screen, on the left side of the screen is a photograph that has the digital talking book machine, and to the right of that is a blue plastic mailing container, and sitting inside of that is one of our talking book cartridges that is a white rectangle. So the digital talking book machine is designed to be a tabletop player. It's about, I would say about 8 inches long, about 5.5 inches wide, and about 2 inches thick or 2.5 inches thick. And then the talking book cartridges that are inserted that have the books on them, inserted into the player, are about the size of a credit card in terms of their dimensions, but are about 1/4 inch thick. So they're thicker than your average credit card. When a patron signs up for service, they can indicate whether they want to receive one of these machines and read books using the digital talking book machine and cartridges. The talking book machine can be plugged into a wall outlet, but it also has a battery that, so when the machine is unplugged, it will run on battery power and allow listeners to use the battery to continue listening. So in that way, this is an item that people can transport with them from place to place if they want to continue reading. On the each player is a set of buttons, and the buttons are basically various colors and shapes, and this helps users determine each button and its function based on shape, as well as Braille markers for Braille readers for each button. The other feature of the digital talking book machine is that when you power it on and don't have a cartridge inserted into the front to play a book, the player will announce the functions of each button. So I'll demonstrate that now.
Player on. Volume up. To increase the volume by 1 step, press the volume up button. There are 15 volume steps.
So that I just powered on the player and then pressed the volume up button, and we heard the player announce the functions of the volume up button. Some buttons, like the play stop button, actually have multiple functions, so as you press that button, it will walk you through all of the different functions for that button. For example, pressing the play stop button and holding it for 3 seconds will announce the bookshelf mode, which is how when people have more than one title on a cartridge, they can enter bookshelf mode, hear the list of titles, and then make their selection to read the books in any order that they choose, rather than just the order that the items are loaded onto the machine. So I'll actually pass this out into the audience. If people would like to explore it, you can. In a moment, I'll pass along the talking book cartridge so that you can explore that a little bit. If you want to press buttons, no problem. I'll just put the volume down, but I'll keep talking. Yeah, question.
Does the book support earphones or music capability?
Yes, good question. Thank you for that question. The question was, does the player support headphones? And there is an audio input jack built into the one side of the digital talking book machine player so that you can plug headphones directly into the player. And people can provide their own wired headphones, or we provide headphones upon request.
What about connections to hearing aids?
Connections to hearing aids is not possible with this particular version. These machines came out in 2009, so it's before the sort of Bluetooth connectivity. Yeah. So we might see something like that come in future iterations of the digital talking book machines. I don't know about those specific plans, but I do know that they are looking to take advantage of technological developments that have come along since 2009. So things like Bluetooth connectivity, things like Wi-Fi enabled, things like onboard storage, so you could download and store directly on a machine, I think are all under consideration. So paired with the talking book machine are the talking book cartridges that I referenced. So these are what I described that are created for each patron using the Duplication on Demand system. And they are basically USB storage devices that can be plugged directly into the front of the digital talking book machine. When a patron signs up for the service, the machine is sent to them as well as their first couple cartridges with books. The machine will stay with the patron as long as they are using the service, or if there's a battery that needs to be replaced or other kinds of repair, we can just swap out the machine and give a patron a replacement. So the machines do not travel back and forth to and from the library for the blind on a regular basis. But the talking book cartridges do travel back and forth through the mail, and they are placed inside of mailing containers, plastic mailing containers that are about 4 inches long. They're about 3 inches wide and about a ½ inch thick or so. And there's a slot on the one side of the mailing container that allows us to drop a mailing card in that goes, this is how it's addressed to the patron and routed to the patron via U.S. Postal Service. But when a patron receives and is finished with the book, they can remove the paper mailing card that the cartridge was sent them to in that mailing container, and then below that is a sticker with our mailing address on it, and the patron can just then drop this back in the U.S. mail. I should mention that all postage is free as well. It travels through a portion of the U.S. Postal Service that is known as Free Matter for the Blind, which is basically enabled through federal legislation. So that's it's the talking book cartridges that travel back and forth to and from the Library for the Blind and circulate much more regularly. And then when a cartridge returns, we just check it in, and then we could reuse that cartridge, wipe it clean, and just reuse it. So this Duplication on Demand system allows us to basically have items in circulation regularly and keep reusing the talking book cartridges as long as they're in good condition. So I'll go ahead and share that talking book cartridge with everyone. You're welcome to sort of explore. Any other questions about the digital talking book machines or the talking book cartridges and just how that would work for most patrons?
So the cartridge, when they finish it, do you bring it back and it just gets deleted?
Yeah, the books are just basically deleted or wiped off of the cartridge, and it allows us to, in the production process, keep using those cartridges.
When did this switch up? Because I used to use this in a prior position, probably in 2004 or
Yeah.
2014.
Okay. So there was an overlap before the digital talking book machines. Are you talking about the Duplication on Demand?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. That was 2019 that Connecticut started using Duplication on Demand. Yeah. And so this is an NLS sort of update that all libraries across the NLS network are moving towards. And the last update that we had from them about a month or a month and a half ago, I think it's over 90% of network libraries within the NLS network are now using Duplication on Demand. Yeah. So Connecticut isn't necessarily unique. This is sort of a system-wide change. Yes. Yes.
So a patron gets 3 books on a cartridge. Can they cut in and out of different books, or do they have to read one book?
Right, so the bookshelf would allow them to, one, enter bookshelf mode, and then what you would use is the fast forward and rewind button to navigate from book title 1 to book title 2 or book title 3, make that selection. And then I'm pretty sure that if you started, let's say you start with book 1, decide, I'm ready for book 3. So you jump over, enter bookshelf mode, select book 3, and start book 3. You finish book 3 and decide, I'm ready to go back to book 1. It will remember where you had left off, where you last played. So if you remove the cartridge and insert it, it will automatically start playing back at the last point that you left off of as well. So, yeah, so there's the, right. Yeah.
How does that fast forward? Is it fast forward by chapter, or is there?
Yeah, so if you were exploring the machine and you press and hold the fast forward button without the cartridge in, it'll give you all of the different increments that you could advance. But basically the way it works, the longer you hold that fast forward or rewind button down, the greater the time elapses that you would jump forward or backward within the book. So it starts out with jumping about 5 seconds, then I think it goes to 15, then it might go to 30 or a minute, and then it starts going to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And if you reach a new chapter, as you're pressing and holding, it will beep and announce and say, chapter 2, chapter 3. So if you wanted to, jump all the way up to chapter 10 for whatever reason, you could just press and hold, and you would hear when you got to chapter 10, you could just release the fast forward button and would start playing at that point.
I like the sleep function too.
Yeah, so the sleep function, that's one of the buttons that's on there, and that allows people, if they know they might be dozing off as they're reading, you can set it to, again, I think it's in 15-minute increments up to 1 hour. So if you want to sleep after 15 minutes, it would stop playing after playing for 15 minutes. So people who are, especially listening to books towards bedtime, this can be a feature that they take advantage of. Yeah, there would also be navigation headings as well. Yeah. Yeah, so on the player, there are also, so the main buttons are play, /stop, fast forward, rewind, power, volume, and then speed and tone. So these are some adjustments that users can experiment with as they listen. Good. And those were great questions. Any other questions about the talking book machine and cartridges right now? Okay, so we're still talking about talking books, but I want to talk a little bit about another way to access or read books in the collection, and that's using download, an option to download. So patrons, when they sign up for a service, can say, I would only like to use digital talking book machines and cartridges. Or they could say, I would like to use the BARD service, which is the download service, which stands for Braille and Audio Reading Download Service. And so patrons could select just the BARD service and only use that and not the digital talking book machines. They might also choose to use both services. So there's really no restrictions for patrons what combination of services in terms of talking books, BARD, and if they are Braille readers, they can also be receiving hard copy Braille as well. So there's a few different ways that people can read, and all of those options are available to patrons if they choose to avail themselves of it. So I'll talk a little bit about the BARD service now. The BARD service is, as I said, a download service, and patrons can download titles 2 different ways. The first option is to log onto a web browser, and what they would do is navigate to the BARD website, sign in with their credentials that we set them up with upon starting service, and then after signing in, they can search for the titles and download the titles. And if they're downloading through a computer, they would transfer the title to a USB stick, and in order to play the title, they would use the USB port on the digital talking book machine. That's on the side of the digital talking book machine right next to the headphone jack. So they would just insert that USB cartridge and start playing the books. So that's option 1, download through a computer. Option 2 is to install the BARD mobile app on a smartphone or a tablet. And then after that app is installed, you would sign in with your BARD credentials. And then within the app, once you're signed in, same type of thing. You can search for titles and download them. But in this case, you would download the titles and play them back directly through the BARD mobile app. So if you're perhaps using Libby from Overdrive or other download service from a public library, Bard Mobile works in a similar way. So on screen right now is a photograph with a person's hand, and they're holding a smartphone, and displayed on the smartphone screen is the playback feature of the Bard Mobile app. The playback feature of the Bard Mobile app, the buttons are very similar in shape, color, and size to the buttons on the digital talking book machine. So they're overlapping and creating similar user interfaces there. So that is the Bard Mobile app. Then anyone who, for instance, get back to your question about pairing with hearing aids, I wear hearing aids myself. So for Bard Mobile, I could then pair it with my iPhone and play back through my hearing aids if they're connected to my iPhone through the Bluetooth capability. So that's one way that you might use your hearing aids and listen to talking books. Any questions about the Bard service for talking book side of it?
Is there let's say someone's having difficulty with the app, is there a phone number or an operator that could help them through?
Yes, so they can call the Connecticut State Library for the Blind. We can provide assistance with Bard, so that's not a problem. Yeah.
Can you do the app and then connect that to this?
Currently, that is not an option, no. Yeah. Maybe something that NLS would develop and unveil at some point in the future, but at this point, that's not a possibility.
And for instance, like over at the senior center, because we have, registered seniors who are unable or just aren't tech savvy. So would that be something that we could like download on a USB for them or something like that? Possibly as a service. So could we possibly get an account, for instance, at the senior center that we could download, or they bring their own USB and like we download it for them to go home and play, or so just thinking of like options.
Yeah, what I would say is,
Help our seniors who come to us.
yes, so right. So the goal would be to have every patron registered individually, but then if they're registered and you're interested in providing some assistance, then I'd say give us a call and we can talk about how you might be able to support people who are registered for the service. The other thing I'll say is if you wanted at the senior center to maybe have a machine to like a digital talking book machine so you could show patrons how it works, we can give you a demonstration machine so you have things on site that you can just introduce people to the concept. So that would be another route we could explore. So I would just encourage you to contact us, and we can kind of explore what the different options. Yeah. Any other questions about the Bard service? So if there aren't any questions, I'm going to move on to talking about the Braille format. We've up until now been talking primarily about the talking book format, and we talked about the digital talking book machine and the cartridges and downloading talking books through Bard. Now we'll talk about hard copy Braille. So hard copy Braille works very similar in terms of a service to patrons as the digital talking book machines and talking book cartridges. So patrons would contact the Library for the Blind, request the title that they would like in Braille, and then we actually contract with the Utah State Library to provide Braille services and books to our patrons. And so Utah will mail the books directly to the patrons here in Connecticut. So just like the talking book cartridges, hard copy Braille is circulating through U.S. Postal Service. So on screen on the left side is a photograph of a Braille book counting on Catherine, and then also an accompanying book related to NASA that's opened right now, kind of in the middle of the book, and it's a Braille and print resource. So that's how hard copy Braille works, very similar to the talking book cartridge circulation. Braille is also available through BARD in e-Braille format or electronic Braille. And in that case, what patrons would be doing is when they download, often pairing their, after download, they're going to read the electronic Braille using a refreshable Braille display. So this is something that is a device that can be used that has the Braille dots will raise and lower as patron reads line to line. And so it refreshes as you read from one line of text to another. The NLS has created their own version of a refreshable Braille display, and this is actually a new piece of equipment in terms of being available to patrons who are part of the NLS network. This was just unveiled in spring of 2022. So patrons who are interested in, who read Braille and want to use the NLS Braille e-reader can contact LBPH, and we will work with them to get started using the refreshable Braille display, or the NLS Braille reader is what they call it. So on screen right now is the NLS Braille e-reader, and that is about 8 inches in length. It's about 4 inches wide and about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inches thick. The refreshable Braille display is right in the center of the reader, and above that is a Braille keyboard, and below the refreshable Braille display are spacebar buttons. So that is what is displayed in the photograph on the screen. Before I talk about the application process, any question about Braille format, either with the BARD service or with hard copy Braille? There's one other thing that I neglected to mention related to Braille that's also a new resource for LBPH patrons here in Connecticut, but also nationwide. And that is NLS is currently working through what is called the Braille on Demand pilot. So in this case, if a title is available in BARD in the electronic Braille format, then that title can be requested by a patron using an online form or calling LBPH, and we can place the request on the patron's behalf. And once the request goes in, that book is actually printed on demand, embossed in Braille for them, and mailed to them. It takes a few weeks for delivery time and production time, but then upon receipt, that hard copy Braille item is theirs for the keeping as long as it's for personal use. So there's no need to return the items that are requested as part of the hard copy on Braille demand program. The only other thing I would mention about that is right now, patrons who are requesting hard copy Braille on demand can make one request per month. So that's the current sort of restriction on the number of requests. Okay, so I'd like to just mention the application process. If someone is interested in the service, the first step would be to complete an individual application. This can be done by the patron themselves. It can be done by a family member or caregiver or anyone else who would like to provide assistance with the application. There is a portion of the application where if you are reviewing the application, the application needs to be certified. And on that portion of the application, it will reaffirm what the eligibility criteria are for the services, as well as who can serve as a certifier. So those are all listed examples. So, and the NLS has tried to provide a range of different people who can certify. So generally speaking, people who are medical professionals, social workers. So here in Connecticut, we have the Bureau of Education and Services for the Blind, and they have social workers that assist with completion of applications and also the certification of applications. So that's an example of how social workers might help with the certification process. In the context of schools, they specifically list a number of different school personnel that would be eligible for certification, including librarians and other counselors, as well as, I believe, principals are listed. So I would just encourage people to take a look at the certification portion. The certifier will sign off on that portion of the application, verifying that the individual is eligible for service. And once the application has been completed and certified, it can be sent to LBPH. LBPH can receive applications either through the mail, through fax, or through email, and have the contact information on another slide that I'll share with everyone. Once a person's application has been accepted, then the next step is we send a welcome packet, and depending on the services that the individual indicated they would like to use, for example, the digital talking book machines and cartridges or Bard, then we'll begin to share information or send them the equipment necessary to begin using the service. The readers advisors, I mentioned them briefly, but these are staff members who work at LBPH who work with patrons over the telephone and email to provide assistance with book requests, with reference information, and also if a patron would like to make any kind of change to their account and the way it's set up. I gave some examples of how we can customize the cartridges so that they would contact their reader's advisor to make those changes. And the reader's advisors really serve as a great connection for patrons, and they're the primary point of contact for patrons. So I would just generally say that for new and current patrons out there, that if you ever have any questions or need any kind of assistance, please call, give us your name, and we'll connect you with your reader's advisor. Our contact information, the mailing address is 786 South Main Street, Middletown, Connecticut, 06457. If you'd like to reach us by phone, you can use our 860 number or our 800 number. The 860 number is 860-704-2220, or the 800 number is 800-842-4516. Some people can prefer to communicate by email, so that's possible. You can email us at csl.lbph@ct.gov. That's csl.lbph@ct.gov. Generally speaking, we're open to serve the public Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Currently, because of current conditions, we are open by appointment only, but give us a call if you'd like to come and we can work with you on that. Finally, if anybody has any questions, they're welcome to contact me, and my email address is Matthew, MATTHEW Giza, that's GEEZA @ct.gov. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any final questions if anyone has questions. Yes. It is possible if people would like to pick up to do walk-in service. So just contact us and let us know you'd like to do a walk-in, and we can create the cartridges and have them ready to go if we know what your order is. There sometimes, with the duplication on demand system, the way it works, if we know you're coming in advance, it's a lot easier to have the order created for you upon arrival. Sometimes you would have to wait to cycle through a couple of other orders before we got to your order. So to minimize wait time, call ahead and with your request, I would say. We have around 5,000 patrons in Connecticut right now, that are active patrons,
And then you mentioned the new bestsellers, so how do we find out when new books are available or magazines are available?
Yeah, thank you. That wasn't something I mentioned earlier. There are a couple of different ways. In the easiest way, I think, for a lot of patrons is just give us a call, let us know the title you're interested in, and we can look that up for you and let you know if it's available or whether it's in production and that kind of thing. The other option is that there are publications that are the NLS produces every couple of months in most cases. One for audiobooks is called Talking Book Topics, and that comes out every 2 months. And that is a listing of the newly added titles to the collection. So right now, I think the next issue will be November, December. So they'll have any new titles added for those months. With the listing is the book title, the author. Each book has a unique identifier number. So some patrons, when they call, will just say, I would like DB 12345, and they've received that number through Talking Book Topics, and so they can just do their request that way. There's also a summary of each title, so there's a quick annotation so that readers can get a summary of that. That's available online in HTML format, PDF format. It also can be a cartridge that patrons receive so they can listen to it. So if a patron is interested in the different formats, we can encourage patrons to call us and we can work with you to find which format you would prefer to receive Talking Book Topics. There's also an NLS publication that covers new Braille titles, as well as a publication that NLS calls Foreign Language Quarterly, and that is all of the new international language titles that have been added to the collection. I told you that's been a focus of NLS lately, adding titles to the collection in world languages. And so this highlights titles added by each language. So those are good ways for patrons to learn about new titles added to the collection. There is also an online catalog that's called the Voyager catalog that we can share links to for our patrons who like to search themselves. It's fully accessible for people who use screen readers and other forms of assistive technology. Any other questions? Thank you. Well, with that, I'd like to thank everybody for, oh, no, go ahead. Yeah.
So I saw that, the friend you said, eligibility criteria, there's also people who can't use their hands.
Yes.
So, would that be somebody who has really bad arthritis, that they can't hold the book, that type of thing would be something that they?
That would be an option, yes. Yeah, so I think, people here at Connecticut State Library for the Blind, we have a very long title, but I think that often sometimes can be one of the ways that people's perceptions of who's eligible for service. There are a lot more people, I think, out there in the state that would actually qualify for service that are using the service. So yes, please, if you have people that you know that might qualify for the service with any of the three criteria, then I would encourage you to get them in touch with us.
For instance, I have people who call and say, oh, my mom, she used to love to read, but she just, has a dementia or whatnot, it's just, she's not able to focus on a book.
Right.
But this is a great, so dementia would be considered under criteria, that they're not, that it's more of a audio, type.
Yeah, that's one we would have to just look into that. That would be one that I would just want to double check. So I would tell you, with general questions, if you're not sure, just give us a call and we can work. Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate the questions. I hope this was informative and helpful. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.